The War in Afghanistan, a retrospective. Chapter 1, The Trigger. On September 11, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic fundamentalist group al-Qaeda hijacked for airplanes. 2 planes were flown into the World Trade Center in New York City, causing both towers to collapse and killing nearly 3,000 people. Another plane hit the Pentagon, and a 4th plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. After passengers and crew fought back against the hijackers, al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden claimed responsibility for the attack, and the US declared a global war on terror. The so-called War on Terror would eventually take the US to Afghanistan, where the Taliban regime harbored al-Qaeda and its leader. Chapter 2, The Invasion. On October 7, 2001, just weeks after 9/11, the US began its invasion of Afghanistan with a massive air campaign called Operation Enduring Freedom. Soon after the start of the war, Canadian Forces Base Shiloh in Manitoba became an important staging ground for the American invasion. It was here that the future Afghan National Army was trained. Thousands of recruits from Afghanistan received training at CFB Shiloh before heading into battle against the Taliban. Chapter 3, The Combat Role. Canada's combat role was centered in the southern province of Kandahar, one of the most volatile regions of the country. Canadians fought bitterly in places like the town of Panjwai, where they were attacked by enemy forces hidden in the surrounding hills. The Canadians, who included elite Special Forces soldiers, were involved in numerous firefights and some of the fiercest battles of the entire war. In total, 42 Canadian soldiers lost their lives in the conflict. Chapter 4, Nation Building. As the fighting continued, the US and its allies increasingly took on a nation-building role in Afghanistan. This involved not only defeating the Taliban militarily, but also helping to create a new government, rebuilding infrastructure, and winning the support of the Afghan people. It was hoped that with the help of the international community, Afghanistan could be transformed into a stable democracy. Unfortunately, this proved to be a much more difficult task than anticipated. Corruption was rampant. Infrastructure was in sharp decline, and the Afghan people remained largely skeptical of the new government. By 2006, the war had become increasingly brutal, with both sides resorting to using improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, to great effect. These devices, often hidden in vehicles or worn by suicide bombers, caused significant casualties. At the height of the war, there were up to 150,000 US troops in Afghanistan. Chapter 6, The Casualties. Tragically, it was the Afghan civilians who suffered the most during the conflict. As the fighting intensified, more and more Afghan civilians were caught in the crossfire. Many were killed or injured by IEDs or suicide bombings. In addition, the war caused a severe humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Millions of Afghans were forced to flee their homes and become internally displaced or seek refuge in neighboring countries as refugees. The war also had a devastating impact on Afghanistan's economy. The country's infrastructure was destroyed, its agricultural output plummeted, and its people became increasingly impoverished. Chapter 7, Bin Laden Killed. In May 2011, after more than a decade in power, Osama bin Laden was killed by US Navy SEALs in a raid on his compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. While this was a major blow to al-Qaeda, it did little to end the war in Afghanistan. In fact, the US would remain at war in Afghanistan for another 10 years. Chapter 8, Growing War Fatigue. As the years went by, a growing sense of war fatigue set in among the American public. This was fueled by the high cost of the war, both in terms of money and lives lost. Despite the continued loss of life and the growing financial strain, the US government was reluctant to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan. They argued that doing so would risk creating a haven for terrorists once again. However, as the war dragged on and on, it became clear that the US was in no position to win a military victory. Despite years of training and billions of dollars in aid, the Afghan army was still far from being able to stand on its own 2 feet. Chapter 9: Withdrawal and Takeover. In September 2021, after 20 years of war, the US finally withdrew its troops from Afghanistan. The withdrawal was chaotic and led to the rapid collapse of the Afghan government. This left thousands of Afghans who had worked with the US government, as well as those who had collaborated with the US military, fearing for their lives. There was a massive exodus of people trying to flee the country, many clinging to the outside of planes as they took off. The world watched in horror as families were torn apart and innocent people were killed in the rush to leave. Chapter 10: The Legacy. Today, Afghanistan remains a dangerous and unstable country. The legacy of the war continues to haunt the nation and its people. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the war is the deep sense of disillusionment and cynicism that it has left in its wake. For many Americans, the war in Afghanistan has come to symbolize the folly of military interventionism. After investing so much blood and treasure into the country, it seems as though the US has very little to show for it. And so it is that the war in Afghanistan has come to be known as America's longest war. A war that began with such hope and promise, ended in tragedy and defeat. The human cost of the war is immeasurable. Thousands of innocent lives were lost and millions more were disrupted. The war also had a profound impact on the United States and its allies. The images of September 11th continue to haunt us, and the war in Afghanistan has left a deep scar on the psyche of a generation. The material presented in this video is intended for educational purposes only. It is not intended, nor should it be understood, to be a comprehensive analysis or an opinion on any aspect of this topic. The interpretation of the events presented is left to the viewer.